Okay, so today I want to start about event handling, which is the second part of chapter 10. So we're going to start with the GUI of this one for the event handling, and then we're going to extend it to full-blown GUI projects. That will be chapter 20, that we're going to continue on it. So let's start with this one. Let me get my annotated over here. All right. So the idea, the concept of the event handling is we're going to be watching some event, and when that event happens, we're going to do something. So I'm driving down the street, and if I see a car in front of me, I'm going to push the brake. Or if I want to change my lane, I'm going to put the signal. So depending on what event is happening, we're going to do something about it. So in general, with the GUI, then the events that we see is going to be a button that we're going to be pushing, or the mouse that's going to be moving around, or we're going to be typing some keyboard. And those are the events we're going to talk about today. And then we talk more about GUIs on chapter 20. So the idea of the event is something is going to happen. So we're going to push a keyboard, we're going to click a mouse, we're going to click a button, and they can have multiple events, and we're going to be looking at some of them. Maybe so. For example, when I say click a button, I can have a mouse over to the button. I can have mouse away from the button. I can have mouse click. I can have mouse release. I can have right click. So all of those things I can write program for it. So when that event happens, if I bring my mouse over a button, that's the event. Now, based on that event, I can do something. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this chapter. So some of so if there is an event is happening, we're going to have some kind of a listening to it. So if my phone is going to be ringing and I'm not responding, I'm not listening, I'm not going to do anything about it. But if my phone rings and I'm listening to the ring, and then I can answer the phone or answer my text, or if something happened in my screen, somebody send me a chat note. If I am watching it or I'm looking at it, then I can respond back to it. But if I turn it off, I'm not looking at it, then I'm not going to respond back to it. So for the events that's happening, I have to have a listener that's going to be listening to this event. And based on the event, we're going to do something. So if I see a car in front of me, I have an option of pushing a brake, or I have an option of changing my lane. So based on something, I'm going to decide what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a right turn, left turn, or push the brake. So based on the example that book has is about the air conditioning unit, that if we change the temperature on it, then based on what we do on the knob or on our app, then the air conditioning is going to be blowing cold or hot air and adjust to the level that we are asking. So every time that event happens, something must be listening to that event. So we have a listener and we have a source of the event. What is the event itself? And what is the, when I listen to it, what I'm going to be doing. If you have any questions during what I'm saying, please stop me and we can talk more about it. Okay, so when an event is happening and a listener is listening to that event, when that thing happens, then we got to do something about it. That's called event handling. So a lot of things can happen on my screen. I can be moving my mouse. I can be pushing my keyboard, but then based on those events, I'm going to do something about it. So if I click my mouse or I push a key, based on those things, I'm going to do something. And you can see that in when you're playing game, you click a mouse or you push a key, arrow key, or certain keys, and something is going to happen in your game. So we're going to be doing some event handling. Now, let's start with something very, very basic, and then we take it to the next level. So we have a button. We're going to create a button, and then we're going to be some program is going to be in the background listening to what's going to happen to this button. And as soon as I click on the button, my action is click on the button, then I'm going to go out there and do something about it. So in this case, you said just print a message whenever the button is clicked. So we have an interface called action listener. And this action listener is coming in from the top level, from the object. So I don't have to write it, but I can override it and do what I need to do. So action listener is already there. Now inside the action listener, there is something called action perform. And you can see in this interface, action perform doesn't have any implementation. So my job is to write the implementation, or basically say what we're going to do if this action happens. So that's the job of the action listener. So the action perform is the one that we're going to be writing. So the example that we're going to do is, as soon as we're going to create a button, as soon as you click on the button, we're just going to say I was clicked. So very, very basic right now. We just want to practice on what's going to happen, how we're going to create a button, what's going to happen when I click on it, and how can we connect them together. Any questions so far? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to do the some class. We're going to create a class. And remember, we're going to be in the GUI, especially in the GUI, we got to break things down to modules. We got to focus on one module at a time. If you want to do the whole thing, it's not going to happen. You have to break it down in the module. You're going to be focusing on one module at a time. So at this time, I'm going to have a class that I'm going to put my action perform in it. What I'm going to do when something happens. So I have the action listener that it's coming in from the top level. I'm going to use the implements because it's an interface. And inside of that, I'm going to be overriding the action perform. So I'm going to write down what is it that I want to do when an action is going to happen. Remember, I don't care how this is happening. I don't care where is it coming from. I'm just focusing that if an action happens, what do I want to do with it? So in this case, I just want to print out the message. Generally, you don't use print in your class. We're just doing some practices right now to learn what's happening so we can move on. So we got this created. Now we're going to create an object of the class we just created. So we created a class that's going to have the action that I want to do. And now I'm going to create an object for that. Now I have an object of the class that's going to be listening and performing something. Now what I need to do is I have to connect this listener to the button. So if I have a listener over here and I have a button over here, somehow they have to be connected. So I am connecting this action listener to the button by using the dot add action listener. And then we pass this object to it. Remember, this is an object. So we create a class first. We create an object of that class. And then we're going to put it connected to the button at this time. That means what? I create the button somewhere. I'm not worried about that right now. All I'm worried about is how do I connect my action listener object to my button. This is the way we're going to add. Yes, I know I have to have a button before I do this, but that's not my concentration right now. My concentration is how do I connect them together. So I have a listener, I have added to the button. So whenever the button is clicked on the, when it's clicked, it's going to go and call this. And that's going to be action perform, and it's going to be passing an event in it. We're going to look at it more. Remember, it's coming in from the top. So this event is going to have some stuff in it that we can use. We're not going to do it right now, but that's what's going to happen. And that's where the action perform is the one that's going to be printing the message that we have. So my action perform was this one. So the listener.action perform event is going to be the one that's going to be happening. So we have to have a button to be able to do all these things. So we kind of went backward. We created our listener, we added to our button. Now we're going to create the button, because if the button is not there, it's not going to work, right? So we're going to use the J button to create the button. We did something like that before. So just looking at the whole thing, what we're doing is, if you guys remember, we did some of these things already. So we have to have a frame. We're going to create a button. We're going to call it button. You can call it anything you want. And then we're going to give a label to the button. So when the button is going to show up, it's going to display this one on top of the button. We're going to add this button to our frame. Again, we are doing the simplest way right now to know how it's going to happen. And then we're going to take it to the next level. Then we're going to create our action listener. Remember, this was another class somewhere else. We're going to create an object for it. We're going to add it to the button. So we create the button, we add it to our frame, we're going to create a listener, we're going to add this to the button. And of course, we're going to do the basic stuff for our frame. That would be setting the width and the height, and of course, close operation. So when I push the X, it's going to close the whole thing. And I have to put the visible equal true. Otherwise, it's not going to show anything. I can put everything in there and nothing's going to come up. Are you with me so far? Do you have any questions? Okay. What we talked so far was every time you create a project, you break it down to classes, and each class is going to be doing one task and one task only. Now, what we're going to be talking about here is you are capable of creating a class inside another class. Call it inner classes. So we're going to create a class inside another class. Why do we want to do that? When you create a class, first of all, I think I have it here somewhere. So one of the reasons that we're doing it is because this class is not going to be used anywhere else. It's just going to be used right here. So if I'm creating this action listener is going to be happening with this button, and it's going to happen right here. No other button is going to be using this action listener, or no other stuff is going to be using it. So for that reason, it's just going to happen only one time. See, this class is going to create one object, and it's going to happen only one time. So I don't need to clutter my other ones. I can put this one next to other classes. I can do that. But one advantage that I have over here, if I do it in a class, and that's, again, if we decided that this class is only going to happen one time inside of here. If it's going to happen more than one time, we don't want to put it inside this class. We just want to separate it by itself. Another advantage that we have here is when you have this inner class, this inner class has access to instance variable of the class surrounding it. So my inner class has direct access to instance variables. I don't have to go through methods to do that. We have that access. So those are the two things that has, and we're going to be using inner classes. For me, for now, we're going to use the inner classes only for the listeners and only in the GUI. We don't use this anywhere else because it's going to get very, very messy. So that's where we're going to be using it. Now, the only way that this inner class, so here I am making a class inside of another class. Now I'm going to try to access an instance variable. Here I'm creating a bank account. And if I want to access the internal instance variables, they have to be called final. Otherwise, I cannot directly access it. In this case, it's not a big, huge thing because I'm calling the methods. I'm not calling directly anything in there. So
why are they declared final?
So local variable here. So local variables that are accessed by the inner class method must be declared as final. So if you have an inner class over here and you want to directly connect to the instance variable, it has to be called final, basically not letting other ones from outside change anything in it. So we are accessing it through the inner class. And that's the rule we got to follow. And that's only if you want to use, that's only if you want to use local variable that's going to be accessed by the inner class. Remember, these are local to my class. And the inner class is going to try to access it. Okay, so let's take it one step higher than that. In here, we are creating a frame. We are creating a button. We are adding our buttons to our frame. We're going to create a new bank account. We're going to create our inner class right here. Whenever you click that button, what we want to do is we want to get the balance, calculate the interest, and add interest to the balance, and then print out the balance. So that's what we're going to do whenever it's click the button. So we have this class. This class has to create an object before you use it. So we're going to create a new action listener, and we're going to put it right here in the listener. Remember, this is both of them are the names that I'm giving you. The action listener is coming in from the top, but these two are the one that I'm creating over here. Now that I created listener, or whatever you want to call it, now I got to add this to my button, and I figure out the rest of the stuff for my frame. Got that?
Yes.
All right. So we are going to be adding more stuff. So we just learn about a button, and we learn about clicking and listening to the button. So when it's click, we're going to do that. So we have a few more things to work on. Right now, at this time, anything happen, we're just going to perform the action that we want. So we are not looking at a specific click, release, or anything in that matter. And so we're going to go to more detail of that as we go forward. with this chapter and next chapter. So we are adding more stuff to it. So in this case, we have a button, and then next to the button, we're going to add a label. Now that we have more stuff to do, what we're going to be doing is we're going to put the stuff in the panels, and we're going to add the panel to the frame. So you can think about it that you have a picture frame, and then you break it down to smaller pieces, and each section you're going to be doing something in that area. We're going to spend more time on those as we go forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our stuff like button and label right now. We're going to add them to panel. We can have multiple panels in a frame. And then we're going to take that panel and we're going to add it to the frame. And then we're going to learn how to move things around as we go forward. So to create the button, we were using J button. To create a label, we're going to create a J label. J label is going to have a text. So in this case, we're going to put the balance as a string. We're going to add the get balance to it. So this label is going to show this is what my label is going to be.
So what happens when we click the button add interest? What is that? The response to that?
Good. So we're going to create a button. We're going to put a text on top of it. It's called add interest.
So we're gonna
when we press that,
go ahead.
We're going to add the interest to the balance that we have, and we're going to display it again. So right now, when I start my program, it's going to show 1100. I'm going to push this button. It's going to calculate the interest, and it's going to add to this.
Okay, so what I thought was that the user was going to be able to like add some specific interest to that amount to see how it compounds over time or something like that.
Well, you remember, we are starting very small. We're just taking one baby step at a time. Okay. We will do those kind of things later. Right now, we just make it very, very simple because we are practicing on button, label, action listener. We want to get these things down, and then we can make it the way that you're talking about. So right now, we are doing it very simple. All we do is we have a button. If you click on the button, it's going to calculate the interest, it's going to add it to the balance, and it's going to show my new balance. That's what we're doing right now. Okay? So we're going to be writing that. Where do we write that code? The actual adding interest. Where does that go to? When do we calculate the interest?
In the bank account class?
No.
When the button is clicked.
So what again?
When the button is clicked.
Yeah, when the button is clicked, yes. So that would be in my action perform. So in my action perform, I'm going to be doing that interest. I'm going to add it to the balance. Now, before we do that, what do we need? We need a button. We need a label. So we got to create a. So remember what I said. We have a frame. Inside the frame, we have panels. We need these things as we go forward to organize the stuff. So we're going to have a panel. We're going to create button. We're going to create label. We're going to add the button and the label to our panel. Then we're going to add the panel to our frame. So we need to create our button. We need to create our label. We're going to add those to a panel. That means I have to create a panel. Then I'm going to add that panel to my frame. That means I have to create a frame. So we're going backward. So I have to have a frame. Inside my frame, I have a panel, or multiple panels. I'm going to have my button and label inside of that panel. That's the order we're going to do. So we're going to create a button. So the J button is going to create my button. Then we're going to create a label. That would be the J label. We're going to take those two. We're going to add it to our panel. So we're going to create it in a panel. So when we click on the button, it's going to call the action perform. And the action perform is the one that we're going to be doing the calculation. You could have this in your bank account class and you just call it a week. But the actual interest is only going to happen in this application that we're doing if you click the button. So if your bank account had calculate interest as a method, we could call that one. That's fine. We could do this one. We could, if we had something like this in the other class, we could call it. That's fine. So we are calculating the interest because we are doing it when we click the button. And then we're going to deposit that interest. Remember, when you deposit, it's going to add it to the balance. So now that it happened, we're going to do the set. Remember, in general, we had set and get. You're going to see that a lot in the GUI. So if I have a text, I can set the text, I can get the text. So in this case, I am setting the text of the label. So whatever it was before, I'm going to change it. So I'm going to put the balance equal, and then I can do the balance after that. If I decided to do it a little differently, I could have two labels. One would be showing the, just the word balance, and one would be doing the actual balance. So this would be a string balance. This never would change, and this one would change. So if I had two labels, I could just have the second one change. But in this case, we're just going to add it to this label and show it. Are we okay so far? Do we have any questions? All right. So this is the one that we're going to be working on right now at this time. So we have we're going to create a button. We're going to create an account, bank account. We're going to create a label. We're going to add our button and label to the panel. So we have to create a panel. Then we're going to be writing our action listener as an inner class. Then we're going to create an object of action listener. Remember, we have to have options to do this. Then we're going to add that object of action listener to the button of the class. But let's go over a few more things. So one thing that can happen, and I have seen this a lot, I have done it myself, is we forget to connect the action listener to the button or any other event source that we want to do. So what happens is we're clicking on the button and nothing happens. So if that is the case, the first thing I'm going to check to be sure that I have connected, especially with the GUI, and especially because we have so many elements, we have to be sure that they are connecting to each other. So that's something that we have to do. Got to watch out for that. All right, so there is something else, and there is all kind of things available. There is tons of stuff available. We are not going to be able to go over all of them. We're just starting to show you some things that's available. But if you end up doing these things, there's going to be tons of libraries available and you can do a lot of stuff. And you can play with them as we go through the final project. So you can see what things is available to you. My goal is for you to finish up your final project early, and that way you can add more stuff to it just for fun of it. So we have an area called swing, and in there we got a bunch of stuff available. One of them is called timer. So we can add timer to our program. So we gotta be creating a timer for the events that we want to do. And then of course, we're going to do it in the action listener. So we're going to create a new listener. We're going to have, why is this like that? Where did you go? Okay, so just like any other place, we need to have a listener to listen to it. Then we're going to create a timer that we can have interval, and then we're going to add this listener to it. And then we're going to start it. So this is the way we're going to be starting the timer. So let's look at an example. So we know how to create a rectangular. We're going to know how to do a repaint so we can see it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a rectangular that we're going to click anywhere, and this rectangular is going to come to my click. So that's what this is about the timer, which one we do. Okay, so you know about the rectangular and how you're going to do it. So in this one, we're going to have the action perform. Now, we're going to move the rectangular by this much. So we have different way of doing it. So if I click somewhere and I want my rectangular come to me, I have to calculate where did I click. So when I click my mouse, I can get the X and Y and change the rectangular X and Y to that. In this case, what it's doing is as soon as it's just moving one. So it's just moving one, it's adding one to the X and adding one to the Y. So in this case, we have a delay of 100 milliseconds. So a lot of times our computers are a lot faster. So 100 milliseconds might not be that much. So you can increase it if it's going too fast. So what we're saying over here, it says we're going to create a timer and we're going to delay 100 milliseconds. And then we're going to go to the listener. So the listener is going to be what? It's going to move rectangular by 1 and 1. So now I have to have something like this. And of course, nothing's going to happen till we start. So we start, and then the timer is going to be 100. Every 100 milliseconds, it's going to move my rectangular 1 by 1. I'm going to go do this. When we're doing some painting, like 2D graphics, we have to call the repaint, otherwise the changes that we do is not going to show. Okay, I'm going to hold on to this because I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to talk to me. I cannot talk to everybody, so maybe 1 or 2 people I can talk to. And then we continue with this on Friday. Remember, you have a small activity 9.3 that you can start on it right now and finish it up. You got to have somebody with you. or you can do it by yourself later on today.
Question. So just this week, we're only finishing chapter 10, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
So are we going from chapter 10 to chapter 20?
Yeah.
We're not gonna do chapter 11, 12.
We're gonna. Didn't you say you can read that one chapter every day?
I don't know.
Now, I need this because we want to, when we start doing our final project, we want to have, okay, so we have some chapters, and then we're going to have some data structure chapters, and then we have some special chapters. So this graphic one is one of those special chapters that I want to cover before we get to other stuff. That's something for fun to do. We don't cover all the chapters all the way to 20. But after 20, you have some special chapters that I would strongly suggest to take a look at it to see if you want to add it to your final project. All right, so I'm stopping right here. I'm gonna stop my recording.